Ambassador Keiko Tanaka was 3 sips into her morning coffee when humanity received its first alien ultimatum. The transmission materialized as a shimmering holographic display in the center of the UN Security Council chamber, complete with ethereal chimes and what could only be described as cosmic elevator music. Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third celestial body orbiting your unremarkable star. The voice carried the insufferable tone of a prep school headmaster addressing particularly dim students. I am Kethera, subdelegate of educational compliance for the hegemony of refined civilizations. Keiko raised an eyebrow. Even the aliens had middle management. The being that flickered into view looked like someone had crossed a peacock with a philosophy professor, all iridescent feathers and condescending posture. Your species has reached the unfortunate milestone of developing faster-than-light detection capabilities while maintaining the emotional maturity of adolescent mammals. This cannot be permitted to continue. Around the chamber, world leaders exchanged glances. President Chen leaned back in her chair with barely concealed amusement. Prime Minister Okafor was actually smirking. Only Secretary General Volkov maintained diplomatic composure, though Keiko caught him discreetly checking his watch. Therefore, Kethera continued, the hegemony offers you this singular opportunity for voluntary submission. You have 72 of your planetary rotations to surrender your military capabilities, dismantle your governments, and accept placement under our benevolent guidance. Failure to comply will result in educational consequences designed to instill proper cosmic citizenship. The hologram paused, clearly expecting gasps of terror or desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, it got the sound of Keiko setting down her coffee cup with a quiet clink. Educational consequences, she repeated, tasting the words like fine wine. How wonderfully pedagogical of you. Kethera's feathers ruffled slightly. I trust the gravity of your situation is apparent, primitive one. Oh, absolutely. Keiko stood, smoothing her jacket. Tell me, subdelegate, how long has the hegemony been monitoring our little backwater planet? Monitoring is such a crude term. We have been observing your development with appropriate scientific detachment for approximately 4 of your decades. 4 decades. Keiko nodded thoughtfully. And in all that time, did you happen to notice anything unusual about human behavior patterns? Any particular quirks in how we respond to threats? The alien's expression shifted slightly, uncertainty creeping into those multifaceted eyes. Your species displays typical patterns of primitive aggression and territorial posturing. Nothing that sophisticated educational intervention cannot correct. President Chen snorted. Educational intervention. That's adorable. I beg your pardon. Nothing. Chen waved a dismissive hand. Please, continue with your terrifying ultimatum. We're all very impressed by your refined approach. Kethera drew himself up to his full height, which was considerable but somehow less intimidating than intended. Mock us if you will, but understand that the hegemony commands resources beyond your primitive comprehension. We have reduced entire star systems to compliant productivity centers. Your crude weapons and fragmented governments are less than obstacles, they are amusing curiosities. Crude weapons, Volkov murmured, finally speaking up. Yes, I suppose kinetic bombardment platforms and quantum tunneling devices must seem rather quaint to such an advanced civilization. The alien paused. You possess quantum tunneling technology? Oh, that old thing. Keiko waved airily. We've been playing with quantum mechanics since the 1920s. Though I suppose news travels slowly in the refined circles of galactic civilization. Something was wrong. Kethera's confident posture had begun to waver, and his feathers had taken on a distinctly nervous shimmer. The hegemony's intelligence suggests your species has barely achieved interplanetary capability. Intelligence. President Chen repeated the word like it tasted funny. Right. About that. She stood and walked to the chamber's main display screen, which flickered to life showing a complex star chart. See this little dot here? That's the hegemony home system of Kethmoran. Beautiful binary star setup, really impressive orbital mechanics. And this cluster over here? Those are your secondary colonies in the Veil Nebula region. Cathera's feathers had gone completely flat. How could you possibly know about your secret expansion into the Terran arm of the galaxy? Keiko picked up her coffee again, savoring both the warmth and the moment. Well, that's the thing about humans, subdelegate. We're remarkably good at watching the watchers. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the holographic projector. Cathera stood frozen, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. 72 hours, Volkov finally said, his voice carrying the pleasant tone of someone discussing weekend plans. That's very generous of you. Very sporting, really. I don't understand, the alien whispered. Keiko smiled, and for the first time since the transmission began, her expression held no warmth whatsoever. You will. The response came exactly 71 hours and 59 minutes later. Cathera materialized in the same chamber, his iridescent plumage now a sickly shade of gray. The hegemony subdelegate looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which was probably accurate. Ambassador Tanaka, he began, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. The hegemony has reconsidered. Oh, how lovely. Keiko interrupted, clapping her hands together. But I'm afraid you're just a moment too late. You see, we've prepared our own little educational presentation. The chamber's holographic system activated, but instead of ethereal chimes, it played what sounded suspiciously like a funeral dirge performed by a mariachi band. The display showed a three-dimensional map of hegemony space, complete with cute little pulsing icons marking every military installation, research facility, and governmental complex. Cathera, meet Protocol Pandora, President Chen announced with the enthusiasm of a game show host. We've been working on it for, about 4 decades now. Funny how that timeline matches up with your observation period, isn't it? The alien's multiple eyes widened as the display zoomed in on his home system. This is impossible. Our security protocols are adorable, Volkov finished. Really, the quantum encryption was almost challenging. Almost. Keiko stood and walked closer to the projection. You know what we discovered during our little anthropological study of your refined civilization? You're predictable. Boringly, mind-numbingly predictable. Every expansion follows the same pattern. Every colony uses identical infrastructure. Every military doctrine is a variation on the same theme. Whereas humans, Chen added, are delightfully chaotic. Makes us harder to study, doesn't it? The display shifted, showing a cascade of data streams flowing from every corner of hegemony space. For instance, Keiko continued conversationally, did you know that your atmospheric processors on Kethmoran 7 have a fatal vulnerability to a specific strain of engineered algae? We've been growing it in our university labs for 15 years. Completely harmless to oxygen-breathing species, but it turns your methane-based life support systems into very expensive decorations. Cathera's feathers had begun molting. Actually molting. You wouldn't. The Galactic Conventions on Biological Warfare don't apply to species that haven't signed them, Volkov pointed out helpfully. Besides, we prefer to think of it as aggressive gardening. The hologram expanded again, revealing the true scope of humanity's preparation. Sleeper probes positioned throughout hegemony space. Quantum viruses embedded in their communication networks. And most disturbing of all, detailed psychological profiles of every major hegemony leader. This brings us to our counterproposal, Keiko announced, producing an elegant document that materialized in the air between them. The Terran Educational Compliance Initiative. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? The alien stared at the floating contract with the expression of someone watching their own execution. You can't be serious. Oh, we're deadly serious. You see, subdelegate, we've decided that the hegemony needs some educational intervention. Your expansion patterns show a disturbing lack of creativity. Your social structures are stagnant. Your military thinking is at least 3 centuries out of date. Keiko's smile could have powered a small city. Clearly, you need human guidance. The terms are quite reasonable, Chen added. Complete restructuring of your governmental systems, mandatory cultural exchange programs, and adoption of human diplomatic protocols. In exchange, we won't accidentally release our algae collection into your biosphere. Kathera's voice came out as barely a whisper. What are you? Keiko exchanged glances with her colleagues. The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. We're the species that figured out nuclear weapons before we figured out not to use them, she said finally. We're the ones who looked at the vastness of space and decided it wasn't big enough. We're the civilization that turned paranoia into an art form and politeness into a weapon. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to something almost gentle. But most importantly, Kathera, we're the species that always assumes someone is watching us. And we plan accordingly. The subdelegate of educational compliance stared at the contract floating before him, his entire worldview crumbling like a sandcastle in a tsunami. 72 hours, Volkov said pleasantly. Very sporting of us, really. As Kathera's transmission flickered and died, Keiko returned to her coffee. It had gone cold, but somehow it still tasted like victory. 3 months later, the hegemony of refined civilizations formally requested admission to the Terran Cultural Exchange Program. The application was approved with overwhelming enthusiasm and a suspiciously comprehensive integration schedule. After all, humans had always been excellent teachers.